movement is working to divest in secure facilities and to invest in communities, address root causes of youth crime, and build the capacity to serve the highest need, highest risk youth and their families in the community, not prisons. The United States spends close to $21 billion to incarcerate American youth. Our last virtual panel explored violence interrupters and a public health approach, the power of a strong community-based organization and how it organized to protect their youth, and an intensive wraparound advocacy program. Today, we're going to explore a powerful and very meaningful part of an effective community of caring, restorative justice. We'll also hear from presenters on addressing the needs of LGBTQ youth involved in the juvenile justice system. And finally, we'll hear from a group that uses education as a pathway out of delinquency for high-risk gang members. We found that service providers who are successful in implementing some key service delivery principles can get great outcomes with the most difficult to serve youth. No refuse intake policies, individualized service planning approach where the family has a voice in telling us their needs and a choice in what happens to their youth and family, a family focus, strength-based, recruit culturally competent staff from the communities where the youth and families live, credible messengers and advocates, and to provide a strong job placement and career prep program and have the spirit of a never give up approach. We'd like to thank our co-sponsors, the Social Justice Initiative out of the Bryn Mawr College School of Social Work, the National Human Service Assembly, a 97-year-old membership and advocacy organization committed to equity in our human service systems, and Youth Advocate Program, who for 45 years next month has advocated for and provided services to replace youth detention, youth prisons, and address racial inequity in the child welfare and juvenile justice systems across the country. So we're looking forward to a vibrant discussion and going back to our communities to implement the ideas that we hear today. I'd like to hand it over to my colleague now from Bryn Mawr and the Social Justice Initiative, Tom Duffin.
Thank you, Jeff. Working with Jeff and the committed and talented design team at YAP has really been inspirational and just a joy. I'm an out and proud member of the Advisory Council of the Social Justice Initiative at Bryn Mawr College, which was founded and led by my friend, professor, and lifelong advocate for social justice, Dr. Darlene Bailey. We are a committed and energetic group working to foster change and justice for all through education and the transmission of knowledge, values, skills that are essential to ensuring a more just world for all. Our network at the SJI includes over 300 individuals and organizations locally, nationally, and in several countries across the globe. We believe that the collective powers of forgiveness, courage and compassion, cultural humility, and radical love are essential in creating a more just world. It's that radical love that I'm hoping we can find in ourselves today in our rooms, even in this odd spaces virtually. I'm hoping we can just bring the energy, bring that love to one another and radiate this warmth. I want to introduce our moderator, my friend, Dr. Darlene Bailey, professor at Bryn Mawr College Graduate School of Social Work and Dean Emeritus. If you forget your high school Latin, emeritus, Dean Emeritus, it means earn, deserve, serve. Earn, deserve, serve. I think if I looked up Darlene Bailey in the dictionary, it would say earn, deserve, serve. So I am really proud to introduce her. She has a long and distinguished academic career, but has always been hand in hand with her commitment to social justice and serving others. So with that, I want to just introduce you to our moderator and my dear friend, Darlene Bailey.
Wow. Thank you, Tom. That was awesome. Hello, everyone. Not sure what time it is where you are, but here on the East Coast, it's a little after 12. Some of you are out of this country, and I'm not quite sure what time it is there, but whatever time it is, it's the right time. So I want to thank you so much for being with us. I want you to sit back and relax. I want you to know that you're invited to this very special moment let's imagine we're sitting around my kitchen table. Okay. It's a big table. I had a small family, but we had a lot of food that mom would always stash in the refrigerator and pull out something. So we never went hungry, no matter what. We had a big, big table, and we've got a good group of people around us as well. Okay. So sit back and relax and enjoy. I want to thank those of you, 400 of you that registered to be with us today. And I want to underscore what Carla said. We're not going to be able to get to all the questions that you asked when you registered, but we're going to try to perhaps even find a way to get to some of our panelists and ask them if they'd be willing to jot some quick answers down to some of the questions, and then we can post them for you to have later. Thank you so much. Okie dokie, so let's get started. I'm going to very quickly introduce by saying the name of each of our speakers. And I realize that not all of us got our pronouns up there, but mine are she and hers, and Fanya's are she and hers, I believe we said as well. Michelle got hers, Bijan got his, they, and Ty didn't get his up, and Jeff is hanging out to add even more diversity to our panel. So here we go. Okay, could you just introduce yourself, maybe, and I know this is going to be hard, but the folks that are with us will excuse us because we didn't rehearse all this, okay? If you could please just give a 1-minute introduction of yourself, and then I'm going to transition into some questions for each of you specifically, and then we'll go to some of the questions that were asked when people registered. Does that sound like a good place to be? And meanwhile, I'll serve up, let's see, at my house right now, I will serve up some waffles, some chicken waffles. Okay, that's what I'm going to serve up. Okie dokie. So I'm going to invite Michelle to first introduce herself.
Thank you, Darlene. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are, like Darlene said. I am honored to be here. I am Michelle Caldera, she, hers. I'm here today in my role as co-founder and president of Boston Uncornered, which is a community-based model that we have been implementing for the last 5 years in Boston. And I love the connection between the title of the series and On the Road to Unlocked, because we're talking about different strategies to unlocking the potential of youth. And that's what we do at Uncornered. We call our young people core influencers, and our goal, our work, is to unlock the potential of core influencers.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Very quickly, where are you sitting right now?
I am in my work from home office in London, UK, across the pond.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Fanya, I'm going to get you right in the middle of a sip. My sister Fanya. Unmute yourself, and then we'll be able to hear you even better.
Sorry about that. Good morning for us. I'm here in Oakland, the land of the Ohlone people, and it's 9 o'clock or so here. Thank you so much, Jeff, for that beautiful framing, and Tom for that wonderful statement of values, and thank you, Carla and Darlene, for all that you've done to put this beautiful panel on, and thank you, co-panelists. As I said, I'm calling in from Oakland, California. I am a retired civil rights attorney of about 30 years. I left the practice of law to found a restorative justice organization called Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth to interrupt the school to prison pipeline and mass incarceration, and to also, as was said by Michelle, help to unlock the infinite potential of our youth. Yeah, so I think I'll just stop there.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Fanya. Swing on up. As I look at the head of the table on this end, I got Tyrese. Ty.
Hello, everyone. Peace and blessings. I'm a brother, a son, a student of life. But here my role is to basically just talk about my experience from the criminal justice system to a more restorative justice type of life, you know what I'm saying? But really it's just about my transformation and my story, and that's kind of what I want to bring to the table. Something very authentic and something something just very authentic to restorative justice, and yeah, that's what I'm here for. And I'm super excited. Thank you everyone for showing up. Thank you everyone for being here. And yeah, let's get it going.
Okay, Ty, you're out in the West Coast too now?
Yes, I'm in Oakland. I'm also in Oakland, California. It's 9:15 out here. Had to wake up super early just to prepare, but it's all good.
Thanks, Ty.
No problem.
Okay, Bijan, you unmute yourself and let us know who you are.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bijan. I use they, them pronouns as well as he, him pronouns interchangeably. I work with the Youth Apprenticeship Program at Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth as the program supervisor. I also head up our work in queer communities as well as a lot of our work with middle school aged youth. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I love the subject. I love the reason that we're all in this space together as social justice warriors, as prison abolitionists. And I'm currently sitting in Jackson, California, which is 2 hours north of Oakland at the Ubuntu farm that Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth purchased. It's serving us right now as a retreat space, honestly, for staff as we get it together. And it's going to be a farm and a place for community to come and be outside of the city. And access for folks that's a space that's Black owned, that's beautiful, that's in nature, and allows folks an escape from wherever they're coming from, but with an emphasis on folks who don't normally have access to spaces like this. So I'm really grateful to be here, feeling good this morning, also in California.
Okay, great, thank you, John. So you're in the and so if you're not speaking, you can mute yourself. That would be great. Okay, I think that would be perfect. And as you've heard, my friends that are gathered around us, our sojourners, as Sister Fania says, our social justice warriors. We are here to unlock the prisons. We're here to unlock our minds. We're here to unlock our souls and our bodies so that we can soar. And to do that, we're going to get started with just some basic information that folks will have a deeper understanding of the panelists that are around you. Fania, I want to start with you. Can you tell us something about the fundamentals of restorative justice and how that differs from our current understanding of justice, air quotes?
Sure. I've got a few notes here just so that I can stay on time. In the last 4.5 decades, a new paradigm of justice is emerging. I say new, but in many ways it's old because it's rooted in indigenous thinking and teachings about justice. This is a justice that seeks not to punish, but to heal. A justice that is not about getting even, but is about getting well. A justice that is a healing ground and not a battleground. Under the prevailing retributive justice approach, when you hurt someone, this creates an imbalance in the scales of justice. And the only way to rebalance the scales is to hurt that person who caused the harm. So we respond to the original harm with a second one. So officially sanctioned vengeance, essentially. Our actions model exactly the behavior that we condemn with our words. So you could say that ours is a system that harms people who harm people to show, presumably, that harming people is wrong. But this only replicates harm. This reproduces and metastasizes, if you will, harm. Indeed, culturally, since the rise of racial capitalism, colonialism, genocide, land theft, and slavery, we have become experts at harming our earth, our waters, our air, our bodies, our spirits, our children, our fellow human beings who are perceived to be different. So history is calling upon us, if we are to have a future, I believe history is calling upon us to become healers. Restorative justice, rooted in indigenous teachings, as I said a moment ago, offers us a worldview and a toolkit to help us do just that. So it's important to understand that restorative justice challenges the fundamental assumptions and the dominant discourse about justice. And that makes it different from alternative dispute resolution processes such as arbitration and mediation and youth courts and so on and so forth. Restorative justice interrupts cycles of harm through accountability processes, where the responsible person recognizes, takes responsibility for, and offer reparations for the harm. These are the 3 R's of restorative justice: recognize harm, take responsibility for it, offer reparations to ensure non-recurrence of that harm. Just a very brief example. So at one of our schools, I think it was a middle school a few years ago, a kid came on campus with a BB gun. Of course, everyone, the students, the staff, were petrified, imagining that this was going to be another mass school shooting. They did not know it was a BB gun. And so instead of responding to this harm, the youth did with another harm, we chose to see the child's mistake as an opportunity for that child to learn, grow, and course correct with the help of families and communities. So instead of suspending, expelling, or arresting the child, we wrapped him in supportive relationships to allow that young person to recognize the harm he caused, take responsibility for it, and take action to repair it. And in that case, the young person, those he harmed, and family and community members came together and collectively held him accountable in a supportive way. It happened that he was an artist. So they all agreed that he would do right by his school and community by, one, doing a public apology, by saying sorry, and two, by doing sorry. He did research and used his artistic talents to create a traveling exhibit on gun violence. He went from classroom to classroom, acknowledging publicly the harm that he had caused, expressing remorse, and giving a presentation on the dangers of gun violence in the US. So this young man, as you can imagine, learned from his mistake. He developed more healthy relationships and turned his life around. And this is a common outcome in restorative processes. However, had he gone through the judicial system and been sent to prison, he would have come out a more hardened criminal. We know that prisons are the most successful experiment in stimulating violence. They are the greatest stimulant of violence than anything that we could have invented in this world. So the chances of this young person, if he had gone through the judicial system, the chances of his reoffending would be overwhelming. Of course, restorative justice studies show that youth and people who go through these restorative processes have far lower recidivism rates. Just one other thing I want to add here, Darlene, is that we use restorative justice to interrupt the school to prison pipeline as well. I don't know if you want to talk about that now or later. So just tell me.
Maybe a little later, because one of the things that I'm curious about, and I'm sure all of us are curious about, having known your name and your sister's name for so long, can you just tell us a teeny bit about your personal journey to racial justice, restorative justice? Just a little bit, just a titch, because we probably already are over time, but I could sit here right here right across from you forever.
No worries. So my journey to racial justice and restorative justice went like this. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, during the time of apartheid, essentially, and also during the time of the civil rights movement, the earth-shaking, world-changing civil rights movement that was arising to resist that apartheid. And I lived not only in Birmingham, Alabama, but on top of Dynamite Hill. It was called by that name because Black families were moving into a previously all-white neighborhood, and the Ku Klux Klan and other white racial hate groups responded by planting bombs. We were fortunate our home was never hit. Angela Davis is my sister. She was referenced by Darlene. Angela remembers times when she heard noises, and my father, she heard my father get up with his gun and run downstairs to protect his family. There was an armed patrol of Black men who came together to protect their families from this racial terror. And also, without getting into further detail about the way life was in Birmingham, Alabama on Dynamite Hill, I'll say that I was a close friend of two of the young women who were killed in the Birmingham Sunday School bombing, 16th Street Baptist Church, September 15th, 1963. Cynthia Wesley and Carol Robertson were close friends. Cynthia lived just two doors down, and Carol was a very close friend. Our families were close friends. We went on trips together. We were in Jack and Jill together. So losing them in that bombing really put me squarely on the road of becoming a warrior for social justice. So I spent the next 30 or 40 years of my life being involved in movements of all sorts. And then as I left the city of Birmingham, Alabama, and went elsewhere, and became involved in Black Panther solidarity movements, my home was invaded by police, and my husband was almost killed. He was shot and almost killed. And we were fortunate to, leave that experience with our lives. And my sister, just after that, months after that, was targeted for illegal lynching. I won't get into the details of her case, but that's what led me to racial justice. I just devoted my life to eradicating oppression and racial violence, so that I would not lose friends again, and so that I would not almost lose a husband again, or lose a sister again. So I became a trial lawyer fighting racism in the courts. And I did that for 30 years. I continued my activism in the streets and anti-racist movements and anti-apartheid movements, anti-racial violence movements, and many, many other movements. And after about 30 years of doing all of that fighting and of being angry and of being filled with rage because of all of the injustice that I saw, I became ill, I fell out of balance, and I intuitively knew that I was being invited by the universe, by spirit, to bring more spiritual energies, bring more healing energies into my life. And so I entered a PhD program that allowed me to study with African healers. And then after finishing that PhD program, I discovered restorative justice, whereupon I started Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth Organization that Tyrese and Bijan will talk a little bit more about.
Great. Thank you, Fania. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's a lot to be said in that acronym, Our Joy. Having had opportunity to go to a couple of virtual celebrations of people having passed from this life on, we can feel our joy when we sign on and when we get involved. You mentioned healing justice, and I know Loretta Piles wrote the book of the same name. We all have benefited from restorative justice in a lot of different ways. Bijan, I'm going to swing on over to you. And Fania talked about her role in helping to found Our Joy. And you wear a lot of hats. So we couldn't put up your bio on your screen because it probably would come up to here on your neck, okay? You wear a lot of hats there with communications and apprenticeship program and LGBTQ and queer practitioner. Can you tell us about the unique program needs of LGBTQ and queer folk?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Fania. That was amazing. Hard to follow up. But I will begin by just giving Our Joy its credit, right? Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth, an organization that is dedicated to practicing restorative justice from an anti-racist, anti-bias lens that also pays homage to the indigenous roots of the practice of restorative justice, right? Honoring that it's not something that's new that we're coming up with, but a way that we've been in right relationship with one another since the beginning of time, right? All of our ancestors at one time sat around a fire and discussed how to be in right relationship with one another, built each other up, talked about their issues, engaged in storytelling. And that's much of what we're doing in Circle Process when we practice today, right? And so I just want to start there. In terms of my work working with LGBTQ youth, I identify as a queer Black man. I use they, them pronouns and he, him pronouns interchangeably to honor my sacred masculine and my sacred feminine. And so in my work, I actually began with the Youth Mentoring Action Network in Southern California, which was created by Dr. Tori Wieston, which was a program. She was a high school teacher at the time and a college professor. She wasn't even my teacher, right? She actually, she was a teacher that I went into her classroom because she was one of the few Black teachers on campus. And she was one of the few teachers that allowed us to come in during lunch. And I had a friend that was in her class. And this is even before I was comfortable being out as a queer person, right? As a queer Black male. And she would call me out every time. She would say, I see you, I know who you are. When you're ready, we're going to talk about this, right? I was also at the time, at the age of 16, I was experiencing homelessness. And I was a high functioning student in an upper middle class area in Southern California. I was an honor roll student. I was making great grades. I would show up to school every day. I didn't look the stereotypical part of someone who was experiencing homelessness. And so she was the first person to actually see me and question what was going on with me, question my anger, why I was so frustrated, right? And her work with me allowed me to be a part of her program and eventually a part of her nonprofit Youth Mentoring Action Network. And I became, it's a mentorship-based program, and I became a youth mentee turned youth mentor. And I ended up working for the organization for several years. And that's where I really began my work in intersectionality, working with LGBTQ plus communities, particularly cutie pot communities with queer and trans people of color, right? Talking about our experiences and what it means to have a lens of intersectionality in all that we do, right? Not just around sexuality, but around race, around all intersections of identity, culture, socioeconomic status, religion, right? There's a way that we need to approach working in community where we're not singling anyone out or making them feel othered because they show up differently than we do, right? And so that's something that I've been committed to as a restorative justice practitioner. So many of my needs that came up were in my lived experience were able to inform my work as a restorative justice practitioner. So working with other youth, discussing visibility, what it means to be accepted beyond just tolerated, right? There's so much conversation, particularly in queer communities, around tolerance and what it means to be tolerated. And I just feel as though in 2020, we have this younger generation that is no longer just satisfied with being tolerated, but being accepted as a part of community, right? And that's something that I stand for, and something that I learned from the generation that's coming behind me every day. At Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth, I support our youth apprenticeship program, as well as queer and trans people of color circles that happen every Tuesday at Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth in a virtual space currently. Prior to the pandemic, I was also holding middle school circles and libraries after school in multiple Oakland libraries on Wednesdays. And in these spaces, all of these spaces, I've been able to have these really intentional discussions around what it means to be seen, what it means to be heard. One of the things restorative justice teaches us is that everyone has the opportunity to be heard, and everybody deserves that opportunity, right? Whether they choose to pass, whether they speak up, whether they just show up in their presence, everyone is seen and everyone is heard. And I often talk to folks about what their experience of restorative justice is. That's one of the first things I do when I come into circle, particularly with youth. And unfortunately, with our youth coming through our school systems who have implemented restorative justice in some ways, their association is often with punishment, right? That restorative justice is something that we use. Oh, you go to a circle and that's what you do when you don't want to be expelled or you don't want to be suspended, right? And unfortunately, that is their association, right? So one of the things that I've done in all my circle spaces, which unfortunately I've come across that in adults as well, right? They're just like, it's a way to avoid conflict. That's not what we teach at Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth. We actually instruct that it's a way to lean into conflict in a healthy way, right? Ways to confront things head on, to confront tension head on. And that's something that's uncomfortable because it's not our orientation to what justice is, right? Justice is crime and punishment in the world we live in, right? And when you're a person of queer experience, when you're a person of color, right, you already know that you have those two things against you, if not more, right? And so we talk about what it means to be your full self and to show up as your full self in a safe space, and to create a container as a community to show up as yourself in a safe space, right? And it's something that our childhood selves need to understand, even as adults, and as our developing youth need to understand as they're growing into this world. And also appreciating the dreaming space that the circle space allows, right? It's not just to talk about the pain or the frustration with the world we live in, but it's also an opportunity to dream about how we can be in relationship differently. And so I hope I'm not going over time. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on all of those things. I think all of those pieces are critical to my journey in working with all communities, particularly with uplifting the experience of my people, right? Queer people of color, and what it means to be free in all spaces and liberated in all spaces.
That's beautiful, beautiful, Bijan. You said so much. You answered my next two follow-up questions to you. So that's That's incredible. It's beautiful. I particularly like you and Fanya both referenced the circle. And when we think about Indigenous countries around the world, Indigenous communities around the world, Indigenous people around the world, the circle has in and of itself a restorative, a very powerful nature. And your reference to going from a mentee to a mentor, I would say that's what good mentors do, right? We know that the relationship is reciprocal and we're constantly learning. As Ty said when he introduced himself, he's like a student, he's still learning. And aren't we all? If we're awake, we are still learning. So thank you. Ty, you work with Bijan at Our Joy, but your first interaction with it was, as you said, as a youth involved in the justice system. You were also in foster care. What did your experiences in these systems most reveal to you about youth incarceration?
Yes. First of all, I would just like to give my gratitude to RJoy and basically all community-based organizations that are doing healing work, that are doing restorative work, and that is providing our babies a safe space, especially our impoverished children. You know what I'm saying? Our babies who are system impacted, who are facing like poverty and things like that, go through so much. You know, it's so much weight on their shoulders. Me personally, sometimes growing up in these communities, I just didn't feel like I had a voice. I didn't feel empowered. I didn't feel like important. And that's a lot of the same feeling that our babies are going through. Um, Now, in my personal experience with RJoy, with restorative justice, I was going to a school, well, my junior year in high school, Ralph Bunch. Now, Ralph Bunch is in Oakland, and it was one of the first schools to adopt restorative justice. And with adopting this practice, they actually had a very low and no suspension rate and no expulsion rate. Now, what this created was a way in a system where we that the kids were, or that the youth are able to actually mediate their conflicts and heal from it. Instead of suspending them or expelling them, they were able to heal. Now, in my personal experience was I actually had an altercation with the principal. Now, the restorative justice coordinator at the time seen this altercation and walked up to me and basically was just like, no, 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 this is not how we do things here. Now, they could have suspended me. I mean, I was wild and I was raising my voice. I was acting, crazy. They could have suspended me, but they said, no, we're gonna have a circle. I want you to come to this room tomorrow, and we're gonna talk about it. It's gonna be me, you, and the principal. So the next day come and I get to that room, and there's a centerpiece, of course, which has the 4 elements: water, earth, fire, and air. And that is to basically just remind us how we are all connected. Um, and during this process, um, there was a talking piece, and I just had to listen. You know what I'm saying? I just had to listen. And when it was my time to talk, I was able to express how I felt. I was able to express my emotions about the whole situation. And at the end of the circle, the results was me and the principal were like best friends. And I think without that, it would have just been a duality between me and the principal for the next school year. You know what I'm saying? But what that did is it showed me a different way to handle situations like that. You know what I'm saying? And to mediate instead of being negative about it, but what is the most positive way to handle this? And I wanted to learn more. I wanted to learn, okay, what was this process? What was this that was so different in my life that I was just exposed to? And I wanted to learn more of how to deal with that, because I wanted to bring it to my community and to the youth, and to my peers. So at the time, Eric Butler was actually the facilitator, and he introduced me to RJoy at the time. Now, he introduced me to RJoy. I still didn't know too much about restorative justice or the practices, but he asked if I wanted to. I mean, he invited me to the restorative justice, the national conference, the national annual conference of restorative justice in Florida in 2014, I believe. And I went, and I think it was about a week or 3 days or something, and I went, and what it did is it exposed me to it to well, first of all, when I first got there, I had a very hood, like quote unquote hood mentality, right? So like smiling and laughing and being around just supportive people it was just non-existent in my world. So once I got to Florida and I was surrounded by all of these people who were doing restorative justice work, it was just a different lifestyle for me. Laughter, just being around people that wanted to listen. It gave me a sense of voice, a sense of empowerment, and it made me feel comfortable. You know what I'm saying? And that's when I started to begin to really learn the power of restorative justice. And then actually we had a keynote. The keynote speaker was Cornel West at the time. And I didn't really too much know about him or anything like that, but during his speech, well, after his speech, he asked if anyone had questions or answers, and no one in the audience were raising their hand. But I felt so good, I felt so empowered that I just raised my hand, and they, they brought me the mic, and I asked to go on stage with Dr. Cornel West. And as I go on stage with Dr. Cornel West, I'm having dialogue. And now that I look back at it, though, I don't think I really said much, but it was powerful at the time. And I don't know, I just think it was more of the feeling of how I felt, more of what than what I said. You know what I'm saying? Like the feeling that I had was I felt like, okay, now I have a voice. Now I have an opportunity to voice my opinion and people are going to listen. So as that was done, basically, from there on, it was on and popping. You know what I'm saying? We flew back to Oakland, and I was actually offered an internship with Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth, RJOY. And I started learning how to do circle facility. I started learning how to facilitate circles. I started learning how to mediate problems. I started learning how to man, it was just a lot. And with all of these tools, right, with all of these skill sets that I was learning, I wanted to bring back to my community. You know what I'm saying? I wanted to show them something different. And I started to invite a lot of my peers at the time to come work with us, which they did. And yeah.
It's a lot.
It's so much. My personal experience is so much. Like, I could go on and on and on and on about it. But I think the most important thing about this whole situation about restorative justice is like creating a safe space, like I said, for our babies, and creating just creating an outlet. Our babies go through, like I said, go through so much trauma, go through so much things, that we need to just create a safe space. And without this safe space, they won't be exposed to another way of life.
Right, exactly. Thanks, Ty. Again, you said so much, and we can, the literally the joy that when you all are talking about our joy, it's palpable. We can feel it. And you are embodied reflections of what goes on there. You're talking about the medicine wheel with the 4 elements. You're talking about creating a space that people can use their voices, that can feel secure, and have the ability to actually, it's not like they're voiceless, right? Anybody that has a physical capability to speak can do so, but oftentimes the voices are kiboshed or silenced, all right? So what you're talking about is helping people reclaim, to find, and providing them with the skills, the time, the setting, and other resources to actually speak their truth. So thank you. Thank you so much. If I had asked you all to bring your pajamas, we'd be here a little longer, but I didn't. So we're going to slide on over to talk to Michelle for a moment. Michelle, you've heard our joy, okay? And you've listened to Ty share his experience about what helped, and prior to our joy, what hurt. Can you tell us a little bit about Boston Uncornered, the approaches that are involved in supporting real justice, okay, to stop what we typically and historically have referred to the school, the school prison pipeline? I've got in my head as womb to tomb for some communities, okay? But can you talk a little bit about Boston Uncornered for us?
Absolutely, and thank you. I am, as everyone has said, honored to be here. I almost don't even want to talk. I want to listen to Ty and Bijan for the rest of the time. we've mentioned Boston Uncornered, and it is a solution by College Bound Dorchester, which is a community organization that's been providing social services in Greater Boston for decades. But in the last 5 years or so, we have really focused in on this solution to violence by implementing the Uncornered model. And I said in earlier in my brief introduction, Uncornered is really about unlocking the potential of core influencers. And we came up with this term core influencers really because we think it captures those young people that we serve. And they are young adults, youth and young adults from the community who have the power and leadership and the skills to be positive change agents. And so the focus is on what their potential is and not what they have done or what they are actively doing. And so they are active and former gang involved individuals. On average, when we meet them, they have been arrested on average 10 plus times, have been incarcerated, have been pushed out of traditional education system. And so one of the things we really want to do, and that we do it Uncornered, is that we ask ourselves and we ask everyone to consider that we don't all have the same opportunities. We don't all come to this with the same resources and skill set. And so with the same skill set to find our way out of difficult circumstances. And so the overarching strategy of Uncornered is that we suspend everything that we've learned and look to core influencers as the solution. We believe that if we look to our youth, to our young adults, those who are dealing with the challenges most directly, they have the answers. And we just have to find the best ways to support them, to tap into their brilliance, to tap into their power, to unlock that potential again. And I think Fania or Bijan, you mentioned that it's really about pouring in into these young people with resources, with love, with belief. And so that's the work that we're trying to do. We started on this journey really looking to answer the question of how education can be that transformative force in this work. And, found along the way that it's not necessarily about what we're doing, but who we're doing it with. And that's how we got to core influencers. I want to talk about three things that really are the components of the Uncornered model. And we believe these three things really help us to get to that solution. So the first thing is that we hire core influencers, those who have had the shared and lived experience of the young people that we're trying to work with. And we train them and support them and coach them to be mentors to those young people. And we do that with that lens of being trauma aware and trauma informed and looking at restorative practices so that they, and someone else mentioned this also, I hear a lot of the same themes, so that they can be their best selves to support our young people. The second thing that we do is really believe in their capacity to draw on that power. And so we set the high expectation of college, and high expectations work, right? Mentorship works. And so we use those best practices and really, again, bring those resources so that folks can step into their own success. And then the third thing that we focus on is we invest in them. we really believe that again, resources, we provide a biweekly stipend so that those young people can focus on their progress. They can focus on their success, and they can take care of their basic needs. They are coming into back into the community many times, and needing to overcome the challenges of dealing with finding housing and opportunities. There may be parenting. So we just need to make sure that they have the financial support. So not just resources, but financially be able to step into and focus on their success and explore ways to get on their path to healing. And so with those three things, we've seen really great impact for our young people. Immediately a drop in recidivism when someone believes in you. And our young people have an amazing BS meter, right? They know when you look at them and you say, I believe in you and I love you and you can do this, they know who's lying and who's telling the truth. So we see a drop in recidivism. We've seen an increase in matriculation rates. Young people are persisting in college when they enroll, and they're completing post-secondary credentials. So I think there's a lot more that I can say, but I'll probably pause there.
That's a lot. And you also covered my second question, because I was going to say, particularly when I was out in Minnesota, we were talking about, does it have to be college? Couldn't it be a career pathway as well? Couldn't it be, do folks have to go to college? And you spoke a little to that. I don't know if you want to say any more for a moment, just a minute.
Yeah, I mean, what I would add to that is, again, the second piece of high expectations. We really believe in just the power of the word college. It shifts mindset about what is possible. And we know, one of the things that we believe, and I believe really strongly, is that our young people, they're no different than you or me. They have hopes, they have dreams. They have just been, again, not given the options, not provided the access and the resources to find their way. And so I think it's important for us to really keep that word college at the forefront of this, because I believe it sets a different mindset about what's possible. And I think we tend to fall back on, somebody's made a mistake, they've been incarcerated, well, let's just get them a job. Let's aim for more, I say. And I think that's all part of healing and part of what's possible.
Well, no accident. We're hearing a lot of synergy, even direct alignment between your hiring the core influencers, believing in their capacity, listening to their voices, investing in them, and Fanya's 3 R's around repairing the harm, restoring the broken relationships, and rebuilding the community. It's all centered in actually paying attention to what we're hearing, and knowing that these folks are not really different than us. They want to be the best they can be as well. And we want to help them to get on the path so that what they're doing actually is engaging themselves in working constructively toward building their lives and building the lives of people around them. I love Ty, the babies. That's exactly right. If we think about beyond ourselves, okay, we have a sense of what's needed. So we're all simply more human than otherwise. You mentioned, Michelle, the recidivism. You mentioned that word, which we know literally means, right, to fall back. And when we think of recidivism here, we think about recommitting a crime, we think about going back to prison. And you said you have good stats. And we got some numbers folks out there that probably would love to hear just a little bit more about recidivism, matriculation, and when we think about college, and even persistence when we think about college as well. So what are those numbers and how do they compare? Even
Yeah, I mean, it's different from state to state, but generally recidivism rates are pretty high. I mentioned that when we meet our young people, an average of 10 plus arrests. So they've been cycling in and out of either the juvenile system or the adult system, some form, right? They're on probation, they're paying fees, they're, you know, just in this cycle. When young people are engaged with Uncornered, our rates show recidivism rates as low as 15%. In Massachusetts, 15. In Massachusetts, it's I think over 50%, 55%. So more than half of young people in and out of in correctional systems are going back. And they do this year after year. And in again, numbers are different everywhere. I think in Boston, it's $55,000 a year. In the state, we spend about $100,000 per year per gang involved individual. And what we get for that as a city is just another $100,000 that we're spending, right? That's to incarcerate, to adjudicate, to, right, to just have them go through. For those resources, and I think this is one of the questions out there, we can do so much more. And you're hearing it in the voices of Ty and Bijan, and the babies that they work with. And specifically for Uncornered, us creating a pathway to a post-secondary credential. We when we started doing this work, we were at matriculation rates of about 35%, which is already pretty high for young people who have dropped out of a traditional or been pushed out of high school. And we started Uncornered, and our matriculation rates are now close to 70%. So we doubled with this model of mentorship, support, high expectations, and a stipend. We doubled our matriculation rates. Persistence rates are at around 65%. Many of our students start at community colleges, and persistence rates at community colleges are, somebody probably knows this better than I do, around 22%, I think. So that, I think that combination of support, and as others have talked about, really sticking with folks and believing in them, and making sure that they have the resources. You know, we'll see. We have the outcomes. We'll see the impact. We're seeing it here, and we're seeing it in Boston as well.
Thank you. If I mentioned Street Safe Boston, do you know? Because someone reading a lot of papers here, okay? And someone asked the question and said, "Oh, that sounds a lot like Street Safe Boston. Do you know anything about it?" And did your organization take that over? Or
I do. We have learned a ton from Street Safe. Robert Lewis Jr. is actually one of my mentors, and a few of the folks who were with Street Safe are now working with us as as mentors. We call them college readiness advisors, CRAs. And so, you know, there is something about not starting the wheel all over again brand new, right? We have a lot of information out there. We have a ton of resources, and we know what to do. I forget who mentioned it, but it takes courage. It's really about whether we have the courage to step forward, to be close to these young people, and to love them. And I think we can see great things. So we've learned a ton from them and other programs in Boston and throughout the country. I know there's some great things happening in Oakland as well.
Excellent. And our joy being among them.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, it goes beyond sympathizing with someone, right? But to actually feeling compassion, feeling a sense of unity, and having the courage to live into that relationship with someone else, and with these young children, young people as well. Ty caught himself saying kids, he stopped, and I just said children. So I guess the older you get, the younger people look. I don't know.
Right.
Oh, so much, so much. Okay, I am going to try to weave in some questions. I've got some folks in mind to answer them, but let's see how it rolls. Okay, and I'm trusting Carla's going to keep me on time with all of this. And Bonnie, you had mentioned the school to prison pipeline, and I said that for me it's like the womb to tomb when we start to talk about people of color in particular. But can you talk about the impact of the school to prison pipeline? And first unmute yourself, and then we won't miss any one of those words.
All right. So that is really a central part of our work here in Oakland. First of all, the school to prison pipeline means we are criminalizing our children instead of educating them. A parallel with the rise of mass incarceration in the 1970s, schools began to look like prisons. They began to act like prisons with security cameras and metal detectors and wand searches and increased surveillances and a growing police presence. And schools also developed policies mandating wider use of suspensions, expulsions, and arrests for age-appropriate behavior for children or adolescents. For example, we had a youth with us at our Joy who must have had about 150 suspensions before he was able to turn his life around when he got to a school where there was a restorative justice program. But he was first arrested, I think, in middle school for having a food fight in the cafeteria with his friends. They were just playing and having fun. But a food fight is criminalized as reckless conduct or even assault. That's the school to prison pipeline. Doodling on one's desk is criminalized as defacing public property. That's the school to prison pipeline. A 6-year-old having a temper tantrum is handcuffed and escorted out of the classroom for assault by police. And many of you in the audience have probably seen that sort of iconic image of this baby, I mean, literally baby here, being arrested for having a temper tantrum. And children are automatically expelled or suspended to punish them for rule violations, like turning on your cell phone in class. I don't know how many of you in the audience saw that just horrendous video of a girl, I think she was in 9th grade, who had her cell phone out. Her teacher asked her to put it away. She did not. So the teacher called the school police. The school police came in, asked her to put it away. She did not. So basically what he did was pick up the desk that she was sitting in and slam it to the floor. And her body went slammed with it and went across to the other side of the room. So, you know, this kind of just punitive and cruel behavior that we're seeing in places that should be havens for children and nurturing environments for children. And, you know, when we suspend a child for engaging, for doodling on the desk or for violating a rule, cursing the teacher, like or maybe screaming at the teacher in the way that Ty said that he did with the principal. This contributes to the school to prison pipeline because studies show that being suspended once in 9th grade triples your chance of being incarcerated. And it doubles your chance of dropping out. And once you drop out, it's kind of a foregone conclusion that you will probably end up incarcerated, because when you look around the nation at state prisons, 75% of the populations of those prisons are high school dropouts. So the message here is that keeping a kid in school is the strongest protective factor against youth incarceration. And youth incarceration is the strongest predictor of adult incarceration. So strong school-based restorative justice programs are one of the most important ways, not only to dismantle the school to prison pipeline, but to interrupt mass incarceration. And that's exactly what we've been doing in Oakland, in the school system here, is interrupting the school to prison pipeline.
I'm sure Michelle would definitely give an amen to that one from Boston Uncornered. When you talk about people dropping out, and I think about the statistics that both of you now have shared, I'm readily mindful of the statistics of LGBTQ and queer youngsters and the numbers of them who, among other things, are homeless. And I'm wondering, Bijan, do you have any suggestions for folks that may be able to do something, or everybody can do something, even if it's speaking up about it, but folks that may even have an opportunity to put in place some policies, or what do we do with the homeless LGBTQ youth when they're literally kicked out of their house sometimes for being who they are, for, coming out?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a question I get often, and it often comes up in circle space as a point of discussion. I know in my experience, my queerness was not the reason I was ejected from the home, but it was a contributing factor for sure. I think that what's most critical is, again, that piece around visibility, right? And around our lens when working with our youth and the language that we're using. Are we building trust? Are we building a relationship where you feel safe enough to disclose? I know for myself, being a person in an African-American household, very traditional, very Christian, what we said in our household is what happens in our house stays in our house. And it's not to be shared at school. It's not to be shared with anyone except the people who reside in this household, right? And so when it came down to it, and I saw, and a teacher saw me, right? Miss Wieston, a teacher, a queer Black woman, saw me, and she saw that I was struggling. She saw that I was going through. She didn't ask me if I was homeless. She asked me if I had somewhere to sleep that night.
That's right.
She asked me where I was going after school, right? And so for me, those things were huge, because when I thought about the language that was used, and I didn't label myself as homeless. I felt like I was couch surfing. I was staying at friend's house, and then eventually it got into a space where I was sleeping in parks. I was sleeping in places that I just in cars and trunks and garages of friends. But I didn't consider myself homeless because I felt like I always could figure out a place to go. I can always figure it out. I also held so much stigma around what it means to be system supported, right? I held so much stigma around what it means for me as a man, as a Black man, right? To be supported by the system, and what that has traditionally looked like for people of color, and all of those things that come with it, right? I also thought about the safety of my parents, and not wanting them to be criminalized for not taking care of me or not being able to take care of me without anyone asking the root of what's happening here, how we got into this place, right? And so I held all those things. I thought about my little brother being system impacted and being in the foster care. And all of those things motivated me to be very resistant to any type of systemic support from the government. And so when I think about our youth, and I think about our youth in that scenario, I think about, again, just how critical it is to build that relationship, to build that trust, to check in with your students, right? To check in with your youth, even if it's just a one-word check-in at the beginning of the day. How are you feeling? You're gonna hear the things that you may hear is, I'm feeling hungry, I'm feeling tired, right? I'm feeling happy, I'm feeling energetic, I'm feeling motivated, right? Those things give you insight into what's going on with your youth every single day. And you begin to keep track and say, hey, Bijan's coming in almost every week, 4 days out of the week, and is hungry. What's going on there, right? And so I just think about those small shifts and those small ways in which we are in a deeper relationship with our youth, and also the lens we have around not assuming sexuality, not assuming socioeconomic status, not assuming religion, not assuming belief, but asking those questions in an open way and inviting youth to identify and name themselves. Right. So often we walk through this world, particularly as people of color, and we are given names, and we're often motivated, particularly as queer people of color, to code switch, to be safe in certain spaces, to adapt, to not be seen. Right. So what does it mean to challenge youth? What does it mean to challenge youth to name themselves? Hi, Andrew. Andrew's in the background saying hi. But I'm in there. Yeah, I think those are some small ways that also can inform policy.
Awesome. Awesome. You use sometimes LGBTQ plus, and sometimes you use queer. Do you differentiate between the two? Are you consulting with somebody?
No, Andrew's here with me at the Ubuntu house, and his mom. So he wanted to say hi to the panel. He's 9.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't. So I use queer as a term that's more broad, right? The LGBTQ community is not a monolith. Those letters stand for different things. They mean different things. They mark different experiences. So I use queer as more of an umbrella term that talks about people who have traditionally been othered, right? Who have traditionally been pushed out, who have traditionally been made to feel like they are not the majority, and that they are not the majority, and that gives them less power, right? So I often use the term queer when I'm talking about experiences of color, when I talk about other experiences, when I talk about LGBTQ plus experiences. And then I also I also challenge folks to name themselves and to talk about those specific intersections, those specific challenges that comes with those names that they've given themselves, right? I think that piece is critical. So there is a bit of a differentiation, I think, of queerness as an umbrella term, and the LGBTQ plus monikers as kind of like underneath that umbrella, as we all have a shared experience. But again, the experience of Black people, of people of color, of queer folks are not a monolith. We're not all experiencing the same thing at the same time.
Right, right. And you spoke earlier about intersectionality, even beyond sexual identity, gender identity, even beyond all of that. And I'm wondering, Ty, this isn't a softball question, it's a hardball question, but you've got inquiring minds that when they registered, they wanted to know this. What advice would you give, would Ty give to school districts and court systems better support young people who have complex needs?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
I sure can. And others can chime in as well, okay? Because this is not an easy question, but I want you to just speak from your place. It's not a book place, it's your place. What advice would you give to school districts and court systems to better support young people who have complex needs? What do school districts and court systems do? How can they better support?
I think they can better support children with complex needs just by simply listening to them. And also by wanting to learn and unlearn some of the things that we have been taught and some of the things that we need to be taught. I think restorative justice, and I think these practices are culturally rooted, right? These are practices that we have lost. You know what I'm saying? And due to a system where it's meant for people of color and people who are impoverished to fail. And we have to look back in order to go forward, Sankofa, right? And I think what we're doing is we're bringing up these healing practices that our ancestors did. So I think the best things that we can do is really just try to learn these practices and implement them in the best ways possible. Um, when, yeah, I mean, when we talk about this, when we talk about the education system, and the criminal justice system, it's unfortunate, but we link them together. You know what I'm saying? Mass incarceration, when you look at the people who are mass incarcerated and you look at the people who are expelled and suspended, the numbers are the same. You know what I'm saying? And the only system that are meant for our babies to succeed are failing our babies. And so we have to just take a step back.
Right.
And we have to look at what we're doing and look at what we're not doing. So I just think that the kids specifically who are in specific complex needs just need to be heard and need to be supported by those who know how to heal.
Right.
Because you know, there's people that use this, like restorative justice has now become a trend, right? It's now became like something that people are using to quote unquote be woke. So we have to, I feel like what we really have to do is really retrain our whole system. You know what I'm saying? Our criminal justice system and our education system, in order to really yeah. Because a lot of these authority figures are just doing it to get paid. You know what I'm saying? And as we can see, our police are not trained to heal. They're trained to kill. You know, so I think it's simply just going back and unlearning the system that isn't made for us to succeed.
I love that. I love that. Unlearning to learn anew and having the courage, as you spoke earlier also, Michelle, and having that courage to do that. So Michelle, Ty just gave us a good look at what the criminal justice system can do and what schools could do. How can social services in general and foster care better support, and particularly better support LGBTQ plus youth in their systems? You're still muted, Michelle.
So I think you know that you know when you asked that question, and I think I would just echo a lot of what Ty said. It's about voice. It's about, and he said it earlier as well. And I've mentioned it too. Those who are at the heart of the challenges need to be heard. They know what they need. They know, you know, what it would take to help them get past that. And if we just set that aside and you know, sort of parachute in with our own ideas, it's not going to work. So I think school system, social service system, whichever system you're in, it's about those who are experiencing the pain. You know, I say this sometimes to a lot. Our Congresswoman, Ayanna Pressley, has said this a lot. Those who are closest to the pain should be closest to the power. And I think that we just need to elevate those voices and put them at the forefront.
And that's why you call them core influencers.
That's why we call them core influencers, absolutely.
Please.
If I could just sort of piggyback on some of this, I am totally with you, Tyrese and Michelle. And you know, when we look at studies, especially school studies, we find that the single most important factor in the academic and social success of a child is they're feeling a sense of belonging, a sense of connectivity, a sense of being seen. Sawubona, you know, the Zulu. I see you, I see your goodness, I see who you truly are. And so creating those spaces of connectivity, of cultures of care, I think is what we really need to start doing in our systems, which historically have been systems of domination. So we got our work cut out for us. But we in restorative justice create those kinds of generative spaces where you feel seen, heard, feel a sense of belonging, sense of purpose. We do that in circles. With Ty said, as the talking piece. When you're holding the talking piece, you're the only one talking and everybody else is listening. So the voice of the police chief or the mayor of Oakland, and we have done circles between the youth and those people with positional power, but the talking piece sort of is an equalizer, let me put it that way. Everyone's voice is important, and especially those youth. They are experts on what they need because they live it every day, they know it. And so we create these spaces where when we're successful at the end of the circle, when we usually do appreciation ceremonies, the kids will say, oh, Miss Davis, that was such a great circle because I didn't feel like the adults were talking down to me. I thought they were really listening to me. I feel like they really heard me. And, when we create these spaces, as a matter of policy, as a matter of everyday practice in the schools, we are beginning to see really great outcomes like the ones that Michelle mentioned as well. Increased graduation, decreased dropouts, increased reading scores, as well as decreased violence and decreased suspensions. So that creating that sense of connectivity, that healing space, that loving space is really key. For all of us who are doing this work, whether we're in nonprofits like Boston on Corner or Our Joy or the school district or the school system.
Perfect, thank you. I'm hearing an answer to one of the other questions that came in, which was about, I've got a private practice, I'm working with people as individuals, how can I incorporate some of what you're talking about in my work? And I'm hearing some key elements there as well, but I don't know if anybody here wants to just give voice to some of the just snippets into what can somebody do that's sitting there with a youth that's been incarcerated and doesn't want to go back.
I'll just say, I'll just key in and say one thing, just have patience.
Okay.
Disregard the zero tolerance policies.
Excellent, Ty. Thank you.
I would say hire Ty.
I second that. Well, I don't know if I second that, actually. I mean, leaving us.
And what I really mean, yes, Ty, but what I really mean by that is hire folks like Ty who have that experience and can speak to it. Some of us call them credible messengers. Like I said, we call them college readiness advisors, mentors. They're the guide. They are the folks who are understand and can build that relationship with young people. So you really need that experience at the table.
Right, experience and the systems that we're talking about, our nonprofits, our social service agencies, et cetera, need the resources. So some of that, I think Jeff talked about 20 trillion and you talked about thousands and thousands of dollars just in one state alone. If they could be invested into organizations like these, we would really have an intervention, a major prescription in terms of that pipeline. I'm getting a signal to close out, but I couldn't leave us and leave our folks without bringing up the fact that here we are at a time, an incredible time, and we've got this microvirus of the COVID-19, and we've got this macrovirus, right, of racism and inequities. Are there effective ways that programs can come together, maybe interlock? Are there ways that programs can get started even now, even with all of this? Or what are your thoughts about that? We're dealing with major pandemics. Oh, Bijan, you raised your hand. I see you, brother. Go.
Yeah, I did want to take, I'm being mindful of times, but I wanted to take a quick step back and talk about dealing with youth who are formerly incarcerated, right? And I also wanted to add, in addition to what everyone said, a trauma-informed and somatic approach, right? I would definitely invite folks and challenge folks to really put into perspective that you're dealing with a person who has not only dealt with the trauma of whatever harm that has happened, but the double down trauma of them being incarcerated. And on top of what's going on with the youth in their bodies, just physiologically, what's happening with youth and development in their bodies and in their minds. And I would invite folks to move from that headspace and also asking youth on taking note of what's going on in your body, right? When this was happening for you, what's going on in your body? What are you feeling, right? How has this affected you in the way you go through life now? What anxiety do you carry? What are you carrying, right? That all informs working with that youth. So I just wanted to say that piece. And then to answer your question about—
Let me stop you for a second, okay? Because I want to give a shout out to my school, the Graduate School of Social Work and Social Research at Bryn Mawr College, because we're working through a trauma-informed, or what some of us call a healing-informed framework. And we know that not only out in the streets, but even in our classrooms, we've got to adopt these practices that require us, again, Ty, to unlearn, okay, but to be able to actually join in being part of a healing movement and not a re-traumatizing movement. So to bring us forward before we all get the plug pulled on us, okay, here we are, as I said, with this micro and the macro pandemics, words of wisdom at a time when people are looking, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Can you tell I got pretty emotional over that one? I'm just gonna technology is an opportunity to relearn humility. Okay. Okay. So here we are. What can we do? What can we do now, given everything that's going on?
Yeah.
I just want to quickly say, this is the time to start urging policymakers and systems officials to close youth prisons, take our kids out of cages. You know, during Hurricane Katrina, the kids were left behind in New Orleans. Everybody else evacuated. So the kids were left there watching the water rise around them with no food and exposed to such terrible risks. That is the case today with COVID-19. Remove our children, not only remove them, but invest in community-based and family-centered approaches of the sort that Boston on Hornet is doing and Arjo is doing.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Anyone else?
I would like to say one thing. I would just, I don't know, it's something that I've thought about for a while working with nonprofit organizations. And I would just, I guess, well, what's the word I'm looking for? I would ask nonprofit organizations to just think about ways that we can come together as community-based organizations and create like funding and like create even like a money pool or even something for like that we can eat off of each other instead of having to ask like the government or like having to ask for diversion money from like the criminal justice system. Even though that's good to divert money from the criminal justice system, put back into community-based organizations, I would just like for like, I don't know, I would just like to see into vision and to maybe one day witness, you know, when community-based organizations are coming up with fundraising themselves by working together, by teaming up, and by just, you know, in that way, we can really do the work. You know what I'm saying? We're really doing the work now, but that way we don't have any governments, you know, that's hitting us with certain guidelines and certain and rooftops and ceilings. You know what I'm saying? But we can go above them ceilings based off of us having our own money, having our own funding. And yeah, but that's just something I would love to see maybe in the future, or probably even put together. So.
I think it's on its way. I think we're once again rediscovering the power of collaboration, of co-laboring, right? I think it's on its way. So let's hold and hope that the short-term memory that we typically have here in the western part of the world doesn't happen again, and that we are really learning at this propitious time right now where everybody is woke, okay? At least the vast majority of people are woke. Let's see how we move forward. I have to
Darlene,
yes, please.
so if I can just say, I mean, one thing that's happening is we need to. I agree with what everyone has said, and I will add, we need to give people money.
That's exactly.
Put cash directly into the hands of people who need it.
Great.
Some folks call it UBI, direct cash transfers, whatever you call it. They need it, and we trust them to do what they need to do with it.
Right.
They will do the right thing if given the chance. We've been focused on, well, how do we get food to people, and how do we get technology to people, and how do we, do all of these things to help make lives easier.
Yeah.
We live in a world where people need cash.
Okay. Thank you so much about providing the resources. So we're gonna get the cord pulled. Okay.
But kudos to Lee Smith. We did not appreciate Lee Smith in that beautiful musical rendition. So
Absolutely.
got a shout out.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Jeff, I didn't know if you, thank you, here he is. And Jeff, you have some words and then I'll wrap us up.
Yeah, just a thank you to everyone, especially the people that joined us. When I look at the list, many people are really doing great reform back in their communities, in their states, in their counties, in their cities. And so I hope that you found something today that you can bring back and enhance the work you're doing, or accelerate, or use it as a catalyst to continue the work of shutting down youth prisons, as Fania has said. We can do it. Those 48,000 kids, if they had programs like these and the others that we presented last time and that we'll present in the future, we don't need youth prisons. And I think we've proven that during COVID, when we had to release so many young people. And just want to thank the advocates in the audience as well for just really staying to the mission of changing the scenario and changing the dynamics. But it's sort of that, in addition to that, Michelle, thank you so much. Tyrese, Bijan, and of course, Fania Davis. And especially I'd like to thank my colleague and partner in crime these days, Dean Darlene Bailey, for facilitating. Also, Carla, the people that organized this, Carla, Lynette, Kelly, Marianne, Tom, Quadria, Nancy,
a whole bunch of
two other people that are working on this for now over a year. And so join us for our next one. I think it's in January. We'll let other people know, and we'll have a new array of people. And then hopefully our conference will be a face-to-face conference in Philadelphia, April 14th, 15th. If not, we're going to go virtual.
That's
and,
exactly.
Continue our lifting up what works, lifting up how we can build capacity in the community and shut down youth prisons. So Thank you, everyone, and have a good weekend.
I just have a couple of quick things, please. Before you all sign off, there's a survey. If you would just take a moment to fill that out, please, very much appreciate that. And again, join us in January in 2021. May we all soon look like this with no masks. May we all soon be getting around people's kitchen tables again and giving those warm, fuzzy hugs. So stay well, stay safe, wear your masks, vote, stay connected. Social warriors we are. Thank you so very much, all of you, for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you.